the US dollar is powerful because it controls so much of global trade and and the vast majority of the globe's commodities are priced priced in dollars. But here comes the catch. If you use sanctions too much, people are going to lose trust.
Mira que ya viene la revolución, para que se asustan será pa' mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
This is a clip from the Wall Street Journal, actually. This is about the dollar circulation and how the dollar circulates around the world and the power of the dollar. And I want to play this and we'll talk a little bit more about the impact of the dollar, where you see the dollar going, and its role in imperialism.
The US dollar dominates global trade. In 2019, some 88% of international transactions involved US dollars. No other currencies came close. That gives the US extraordinary power over nearly anyone who imports or exports anything anywhere. Commodities like oil, gold, and coffee are all priced in dollars, regardless of where they come from. But this clout has long frustrated America's rivals, making them vulnerable to US trade sanctions. Here's how the global economy runs on the US dollar, and why some countries are developing alternative systems that could chip away at the dollar's dominance.
The dollar came to dominate trade after World War II. The US was the biggest economy in the world. Other countries were trying to rebuild, and the dollar, it was stable and plentiful.
In 1944, a conference of 44 nations agreed to peg their currencies to the US dollar, while the dollar itself was pegged to gold. As global trade grew, so did the use of the dollar to conduct the world's business. Even after the United States abandoned the gold standard in 1971, the dollar remained the world's currency of choice.
The world has gotten used to doing business in dollars because it's just easier than doing business in any other currency. The dollar is incredibly liquid, meaning it's easy to buy and sell things all over the world. The US banking system is very efficient, and those things combine to make it cheaper for businesses to buy and sell in dollars.
Here's how a typical international transaction works in US dollars. A Canadian lumber company sells boards to a French home builder. The buyer's bank in France and the seller's bank in Canada settle the payment in dollars via correspondent banks in the United States. These correspondent banks have accounts at the United States Federal Reserve. The money is transferred seamlessly between these banks' Fed accounts because their status as correspondent banks means they are seen as safe counterparties. The United States says the use of these correspondent banks means every transaction technically touches US soil, giving it legal jurisdiction and compelling foreign countries to abide by its laws on money laundering and corruption.
After 9/11, the US used the power of the dollar to advance its foreign policy goals. The idea was to cut out the sources of funding for terror organizations.
The US used its control of the dollar to increase surveillance of global money flows and curb financing toward bad actors. It did this by imposing sanctions on its rivals. Under the system, if a business or country tries to trade with a sanctioned entity in dollars, the US has the power to cut off its access to US currency. But other countries have been building workarounds. Some EU countries opposed the US sanctions against Iran. These sanctions, put in place after the US withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal in 2018, included banning dollar transactions with Iranian banks. As a result, the EU is developing a euro-backed system that is designed to facilitate trade between Europe and Iran without sending money across borders.
The EU countries still in the Iran deal are trying to figure out a way to work around the US system so they can trade with Iran. Now that bothers the US, which is trying to exert maximum pressure on the Iranian economy.
India already has an alternative payment system in place that it's using to do business with Iran. According to a Wall Street Journal investigation, It's been used to facilitate transactions with sanctioned Iranian entities. But the United States is still exerting its influence in the Middle East through the power of the US dollar.
The dollar still dominates global trade. You can see that in the standoff between the US and Iraq. Iraq says they want to throw US troops out of the country. The US said, we'll cut you off from your dollars in the US system. But in the future, it's not clear how strong that threat will remain as other countries chip away at the power of the dollar.
If the power of the dollar falls, it could hurt the United States' ability to control the global trading system.
Straight from the horse's mouth, Wall Street Journal. Always interesting. Again, right? The political analysis kind of it's funny to look at. Oh, nice pin, by the way. But it's interesting to talk about like the control of the dollar, right? How much international commerce is dominated and controlled by the dollar. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the dollar circulation, how that works internationally, and how it allows the West to transfer wealth from the global South in particular to the imperial core by using the dollar, and what is the future of the dollar?
Right. Right. The thing with the dollar, we've just described the global circulation itself earlier on, and it's let's not pretend otherwise. It's usually the poorer countries, the poorer peoples that are not able to pay back their loans. So those are the ones those are the nations, those are the peoples that are going to lose their lose their assets, and Indonesia is going to lose their timber or their rubber or whatever, or their palm oil plantations or whatever. Philippines are going to lose their whatever assets they have. It's usually the poorer countries that can't afford to pay off their loans. So it's the poorer countries that get hit the most. Now, the thing with foreign reserves is that people don't understand. People tend to think of foreign reserves as just a load of cash stashed away somewhere. Russia's foreign reserves are just a load of dollar or $100 bills stashed away in a vault somewhere in Siberia. That is not the case. The vast majority, yes, they do have bills, but the vast majority of currency in this world today is electronic. So what this means is, yes, they do have some dollar bills, but the vast majority of their dollar reserves, you can think of them as the Russia's central bank. I'm just using Russia as an example here. Russia's central bank has a bank account with the Federal Reserve in DC, and their euro reserves is basically Russia's central bank, or whatever country Smithland's central bank has a bank account with in Frankfurt with the European Central. I believe it's in Frankfurt, or I can't remember if it's Frankfurt or Brussels, but with European Central Bank. That is how they are able to control your foreign reserves. That is how currency it works on trust. If you trust that this paper or these numbers on the screen has value, then it has value. If you don't trust it, then it doesn't have value. If I can give you $10 of Monopoly money, you're not going to trust it.
Yeah.
If I can give you a £10 bill, then you trust it because it's backed by the Bank of England, by the Queen, by whatever. That is how it works. That it just basically, it's a case of trust. How many people trust this currency? Now, but by weaponizing this this currency, here comes the weakness. Here comes the paradoxal. Paradoxically, the US dollar is powerful, because it controls so much of global trade and the global and the vast majority of the globe's commodities are priced are priced in dollars. But here comes the catch. If you use sanctions too much, people are going to lose trust.
Yeah.
For example, you've sanctioned Iran. Iran has lost trust, so they're moving on they've moved on to working with China, to working with India directly, rather than working with them through the dollar. And also, by the way, don't forget, if you use the dollar because you're holding bank accounts with the Federal Reserve, what this means is that they can actually monitor whatever, unless if it's cash. If it's cash, it's different. But if it's not, so long as it's not cash, the US can monitor any transaction you make between different countries or different accounts or different people or whatever. They can monitor it, and they can spy, and they can use this. This is a great source of intelligence for the US intelligence apparatus as well.
Yeah.
So that's another aspect of the full spectrum dominance, if you will.